Well, good morning and good afternoon, folks. Looks like we've got a handful of people that are just starting to join. We'll give it another minute or two before we commence. Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get started. Well, again, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ted Basile from SAP's HANA Enterprise Cloud Division. I'll be your host today. We understand that within the wide range of customers that SAP has, many of you are already deploying lots of your workloads in various cloud capacities, cloud deployment models, and in many cases, moving your SAP landscape, your SAP environment is very much likely the last frontier, that last portion of your corporate crown jewels that you're willing to put into a private cloud or any cloud environment. The purpose of this webcast will be to share with you some insights from the TBR organization, Technology Business Research Analyst team, on what they gathered from their work in analyzing and speaking to a number of colleagues and peers of yourself when it comes to making that shift of your SAP landscape into a private cloud environment, but also how we support that shift, with capabilities and offerings from the HANA Enterprise Cloud portfolio. In terms of agenda, we'll just do a couple of quick intros. As I mentioned, the folks from TBR will spend time talking about their own insights from customer interviews regarding managed private cloud services. Seth Fisher from the HANA Enterprise Cloud team will talk about the challenges that he hears from his customers and clients that he talks to on a day-to-day basis, and how we solve some of those challenges and overcome them with offerings from HEC. And then we'll leave the remaining 15 minutes for discussion and Q&A. So by way of introduction, again, my name is Ted Basile, responsible for global marketing for the SAP HANA Enterprise Cloud organization. With me is Alan Kranz and Kelsey Mason from TBR. Alan is the practice manager and leads TBR's overall coverage of the cloud software and data center markets, leads a team of analysts providing business model and strategy insights for companies like SAP who are participating in these markets. Of course, highlights customer behavior driving those market opportunities, as well as crafting research to support overall business strategy and decision making. Kelsey is an analyst as part of Alan's team, focused on cloud and software research practice. Kelsey leads the analysis of cloud market with a particular focus on the SAP strategy. Kelsey is also responsible for coverage of software and specific to cloud vendors such as Salesforce, Workday, and Microsoft. And then lastly, Seth is a 20-year veteran from the IT industry. He's been working with hundreds of clientele, helping them realize and realize the value of their software investments through financial analysis, innovation, and leveraging those unique cloud architectures that we can bring to bear. So with that, I will shift it over to Alan and Kelsey from TBR.
Great. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So leading into today's discussion, we wanted to highlight some of our research in the area of managed private cloud services. So a little bit of context for what that is before we jump right in. So it's the combination of a dedicated infrastructure, a lot of times provided through the third-party provider. SAP is a good example of that, where it still adheres to the cloud model, but it is dedicated and can be customized for different sets of customers and audiences. And then you also have the managed services that wrap around that private environment to handle the management, administration, a lot of the core IT functions to enable the delivery of private cloud services for those customers. So that kind of gives you a context for a combination of both a dedicated private environment as well as automation or people-based services to manage the infrastructure and the application as part of that delivery. And so when we look at this market overall, although it is a small portion of what kind of classically is defined as cloud, we look at it as about 20% of the overall market is composed of these private environments with managed services attached. It's developed quite a sweet spot for a lot of those enterprise applications that are the most difficult, the most valuable for the customer organizations, and also the most difficult to move, and also probably the worst fit for a pure public cloud environment. So these are not the types of things that were easy to move, saw a lot of benefits in terms of just providing it on a lower cost platform that have a lot of different considerations and value for the organizations. And so as a result of that, are largely still delivered in a traditional on-premise environment that's owned and managed by the customer organization. And so when we look at now the availability of being able to dedicate infrastructure and customize and have the security and performance that are required for those workloads, as well as having the availability of managed services to provide some of the benefits of simplicity in cloud and being able to offload some of that IT overhead, really an emerging market for how to best handle enterprise applications, make use of what's available in terms of cloud benefits, but do it in a way that really fits the differences with these workloads compared with some of the ones that are easier to move and are a better fit for public environments. And so as we look at kind of the four key topics that we'll take you through today leading into the SAP presentation, is that, as we look at that first one, that these services are not easily replaced in their entirety, that for both the infrastructure as well as the business processes that are associated with them, those are much longer term decisions and changes to be made within organizations. Still definitely a desire for cloud, but a longer time horizon for both the technology as well as the business processes that are associated with them. Secondly, certainly we'll go through some of the evaluation for why we see customers viewing these managed private environments as a fit for enterprise workloads. But certainly it's a different evaluation process than we see for public cloud environments, in that in terms of key takeaways, the ability to customize both at the infrastructure level as well as at the management and the process level are some of the key differentiators, because just like with enterprise applications overall, very few are installed off the shelf with no customization. Most times it's mapping to some of the unique process, unique value propositions, and that differs from customer to customer. So certainly that's a big part of where the value of these environments comes in. Third, as we look at, so yes, customization is important. However, there's still this inherent desire to capitalize on some of the benefits of cloud as an overall delivery method, even though it's kind of a different segment of the market. So the ability to have managed services that offload some of the IT administration management at both the application as well as the infrastructure level, deliver on part of that simplified experience that really across the board customers want. It's just a matter of going through all the different attributes to be able to have that balance. So managed services provides more of that simplicity and the ability to offload responsibility for the entire environment to a trusted third party. And then lastly, the other thing that these environments set up is the ability to add in new technology, take advantage of additional business insight, have the flexibility to change as new use cases, benefits, pools of information can be leveraged as part of these overall applications. So it's not necessarily just keeping the same level of functionality or capability as part of that migration, that analytics and those types of value-added services being able to be tied in is part of that overall kind of benefit and driver for the adoption of the managed private cloud deployment methods for some of these core applications. So that kind of sets up the overall. I don't want to give away too much as we go into the first slide. I'm going to have Kelsey Mason take you through the first area in terms of that overall level of adoption and the high-level use case for them.
Thanks, Alan. So as Alan mentioned, private cloud is really that middle ground for customers that want the scalability, the flexibility, and some of the other benefits of cloud, as well as the ability to customize the underlying technology, but may want to keep their either existing applications for that consistent user experience and keep consistent business processes, or maybe they want the benefits of cloud but are unable or maybe unwilling to adopt public cloud for specific workload requirements or for security and compliance reasons. So for customers that have adopted private cloud, we see really two transition paths, migration and replatforming. So when we say migration, we mean that customers have an on-premise license and are kind of switching that out for a cloud-native alternative. And that cloud-native alternative can either be from the same vendor or from a different vendor. And then replatforming means that the customer is taking their existing on-premise license and moving it to a private cloud infrastructure. And again, that infrastructure can either come from the same vendor, so putting, for example, an SAP Business Suite license on HANA Enterprise Cloud, or the infrastructure can come from a different vendor. So that would be bringing an SAP Business Suite license to an IBM Bluemix Dedicated, for instance. So what we found in the study that we did is that customers who migrated largely stuck with the same vendor. So this could be a situation where a customer had an on-premise Microsoft Dynamics CRM license and moved it to a dedicated instance of Dynamics 365. But for most vendors, there's not necessarily that straight path to migration for private cloud. In many cases, it exists for public cloud, but not private. So customers are really more likely to look for replatforming options to maintain, again, that same consistent user experience, the consistent business processes, but gain the benefits of cloud. So for the vast majority of customers that are evaluating private cloud, replatforming is the answer. Generally, the opposite is true for public cloud adopters that tend to follow the migration path rather than the replatforming path. But within these private cloud replatformers, there's a near even mix between whether they choose to stick with infrastructure from the same vendor that's providing the license that they're looking to host, or whether they deploy their application on a different vendor's infrastructure. And what we've seen in some of our broader private cloud research is that having a relationship or familiarity with a vendor is actually one of kind of the least influential attributes for public cloud adopters evaluating their infrastructure vendor selection. So as customers do make that evaluation, whether to use their current vendor's infrastructure or infrastructure from a different vendor, there are a few critical criteria that are taken into account. So here you can see some of the criteria that are evaluated when private cloud evaluators are kind of looking at the infrastructure layer. So the criteria really falls into these three groups: security, service, and go-to-market. Security is the number one concern and really the reason that many customers choose private cloud over public cloud in the first place. But what we've actually seen in our research is that security, while it's still the most important decision-making criteria, is actually lessening in importance year over year. It's even true in public cloud. I think in many cases, customers are becoming comfortable with the level of security that cloud provides and are starting to evaluate and place more importance on other aspects of their cloud environments, such as integration, for example. But nonetheless, security does remain the most important criteria, and within that security bucket, disaster recovery is kind of the most critical aspect for private cloud adopters. With an on-premise application, customers had to manage the disaster recovery processes and the redundancies on their own, which can become extremely costly to put those measures in place. But putting these services on private cloud leaves that responsibility to the provider and kind of out of the customer's control, which can be somewhat nerve-wracking for customers, but it's also why it's such a critical attribute in purchasing. And while private cloud often, I think, comes with the perception of this high price tag, it's this type of kind of task offloading that I think can be difficult to quantify for customers when they're trying to do an ROI analysis, but really areas that do drive cost savings that I think are almost unexpected for some customers. And the other important security-related purchasing attribute is regulatory compliance. So one of the benefits that customers perceive in using private cloud, especially a managed private cloud, is a reduced security and compliance risk. Customers assume, I think, that their managed private cloud providers understand the regulatory requirements of their industry and of their region and will help ensure that compliance with those regulations is met. And so when we look at the implications by organization size for these security aspects, we found that large enterprises are generally more concerned that their vendors cover kind of all three of these security-related attributes that we have listed here, while small businesses are more pointedly focused on the disaster recovery aspect. And I think this idea of disaster recovery plays a little bit into the second level of criteria around service, specifically with regards to the uptime SLAs and the application level SLAs. So not only do customers want their infrastructure providers to ensure the service level of the infrastructure, they also want those vendors to ensure the uptime of the applications, in many cases, no matter what vendor that application comes from. So this is also why the ability to host multi-vendor applications is important to customers. Customers' IT environments are becoming increasingly complex and made up of multiple vendors, particularly in the large enterprise. And what we found is that these application level SLAs are much more important to the largest enterprises that have those complex multi-vendor application landscapes, but want to use private cloud to improve efficiency or aggregate or standardize the management of those applications. And conversely, the uptime SLAs are more important to the smaller firms who really are just concerned that things stay running. So moving down to the third level of criteria, we have customers evaluating the go-to-market aspects of their vendor's private cloud. So something like metered usage and simplified billing. This is a benefit to private cloud that can't necessarily be achieved with on-premise delivery. Being able to meter usage allows the organization to internally charge costs back to the departments in which the workloads were used. So this allows IT departments, particularly in the large enterprise, to transform more into service brokers within their organization. And then the billing aspect is really important to small businesses because, again, if they're using a different infrastructure provider than their application license provider, small businesses don't want to or can't necessarily deal from a resource perspective with the billing complexity that's associated with multi-vendor usage. And then the other aspect I just want to touch on with regard to the vendor's go-to-market strategies is that customers are evaluating managed services. I think that providing managed services is almost an expectation for many customers that are evaluating private cloud at this point. But the most important part is really the breadth of those services. And that's what customers are evaluating. So managed services do alleviate some of the cost and time burdens of management and orchestration and monitoring, making it an attractive layer to bake on top of private cloud that, as you'll see as Alan goes to the next slide, many customers are electing to purchase that services layer. But there are, I think, some concerns around managed services adoption, and so I'll hand it back over to Alan to discuss those.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. So teeing off that managed services topic, as part of the study where we looked at this managed private adoption and usage among customers, so you can see very clearly that for the majority, 75% of customers that we interacted with, that they are using managed private service options as part of that overall private environment. So, I think the number there speaks for itself in terms of the connection and the value for how to deliver these enterprise apps using private cloud environments, but offloading some of that overhead in terms of the management to a partner provider. Now, I also think it's important to look at, within that 25%, really what's the barrier? What are the things that made them, consider those options but opt to do it themselves instead? And you can see the primary driver is perception that cost was more than keeping it in-house. And I think this, I think you always have folks that want to keep that competency themselves and think it can be done at a lower cost. A lot of times perhaps that's true. But we do see for a lot of the customers that we interacted with, the struggle for how to measure, how to document and the ways to think about the comparison between managing the entire private environment themselves and employing managed services to offload some of that. So I think over time you will see more customers, they may not outsource the entire management operation, but we'll look at portions where, from a cost perspective, they're able to document ways that it can be done less costly, or that it could, free up time that enables other benefits or savings for their organization. The second barrier, we've seen a tremendous focus and increase really across the board. SAP will cover some of what they've been doing, but really for a lot of the providers, as well as independent managed service providers, a lot more focus, packaging, automation capabilities that target this managed service area have come on board over the last 2 years. And so I think over time, as customers become more familiar with what's possible and available, that'll help address some of the concern where the customers just don't believe that vendors can provide things that align with their needs and their business environment. And then lastly, a small portion of customers believe that they just don't have any intention over time in terms of leveraging that outside resource, which may persist, but still a very small portion of that overall market. So it gives you a sense for where customers are at in terms of using managed services as part of that private cloud delivery. Focusing again on cost and layering in some of the different workloads that we saw customers using for or deploying on these private environments. I think overall we've seen a rising interest as cloud adoption in general has grown on this idea of cloud sprawl, that inattention in terms of the management of environments. I think particularly on the public cloud environments where inefficiency is really increased. What once was a cost savings activity is now difficult to predict and growing in ways that they didn't expect in terms of the overall expense related to as-a-service adoption of different workloads. And so I think the other thing that managed services can really do as part of that is provide that expertise where they're looking for efficiencies. They're properly managing and monitoring the usage for the services that are being delivered. So you don't have as many of those cases where it's lack of skill or on behalf of the adopting organization that leads to costs that grow faster than expected. And so as we talked with people about after they've implemented these workloads, how did the cost profile change going forward? The percentages are a little bit confusing, but essentially for the core workloads, 90% of the respondents reported an increase of 25% or less in terms of how costs changed. Now, a lot of that is, if you look at the different drivers of those costs, a lot of it goes back to some of the core attributes of being a cloud service, that you're going to have greater usage of applications within the organization as you have things like self-service. Balancing the trade-off between the managed services and the internal admin staff, that for some customers they're shifting more of those tasks over time to a managed service rather than continuing to do that internally. And then overall growth in the business that drives more seats, more utilization of cloud services. Those are all things to monitor, but not necessarily negative things in terms of getting more value and benefit and seeing the return from some of those core business workloads. And then lastly, I want to end on this, and then we'll transition over to Sean in terms of looking at BI analytics as one example of a use case that can be added to the workloads, provide additional business insight. But it also, we see this theme of not being quite ready yet, perhaps, to add in, new sources of data, IoT, those types of next generation use cases and workloads, but desire to be ready from a technical standpoint, from an architectural standpoint, to be more agile and shift and take benefit of those as they come up and become available as part of that overall environment. So that's the other benefit that we see customers looking for, is not just a short-term shift, but one that makes them more flexible going forward. So I wanted to end there in terms of what we saw for insight for how customers are using managed private cloud environments for some of those core workloads. And I'll hand it off to Seth to take you through more of what SAP is doing in this area.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Hello?
I think everybody's on mute, but we can hear you okay.
All right, okay, thanks. Great. Appreciate it. So I'm going to talk quickly here through the HANA Enterprise Cloud that are key to innovation and risk management within the SAP stack. As you look across your current environment and your executive team, the C-suite, asking you to deliver new innovation, the challenges faced by those business owners are great. And as an IT person, you're being tasked with keeping up with the pace of delivering new innovation while also struggling to simplify operations and manage costs. So if you're a new SAP customer and evaluating SAP, the key to driving that success is to align with the business goals as well as the IT goals that you're seeing here. Ultimately, what we want to embark on with SAP is to drive that business value to the end user or to your customer, your end customer. And we hope that by following this presentation today, you'll see where the HANA Enterprise Cloud fits into that and how we can enable stronger application innovation while keeping current and less risk, simplify those operations, as I mentioned, with better business alignment, and then ultimately delivering a very predictable cost structure and financial model to keep that innovation up and current. So what is the HANA Enterprise Cloud? SAP has built a very unique offering in HEC, where we've taken all of the knowledge base that we have from the SAP application stack as well as HANA and developed a private managed cloud offering supported by SAP. And the goal behind creating this offer was to, again, drive and allow customers ease of innovation by leveraging a back-end service built by SAP. The HANA Enterprise Cloud allows you to run all SAP applications in the cloud in a fully scalable and secure environment with integrated support through the current service marketplace that you may be familiar with. That means that not only do we provide the infrastructure and hosting, but also a suite of managed services to help manage the day-to-day operations, the innovation operations, and then the back office database and OS operations that you're accustomed to running on-prem. You can bring your own licenses, or you can purchase subscription licenses through SAP. So we've designed this to be very flexible to meet the demands of the entire market, not just a single market. And it gives customers, again, a very easy way to deploy licenses, realize value, and reduce cost through a simple managed service offering. What we try to deliver, and you'll hear this theme that's common, is a value proposition that allows you to create innovation at your own pace. Because we can deliver systems quickly via a cloud model, we're able to create phase implementations that reduce your time and cost and risk to go live. If you think about today, when you maybe evaluate on-premise, there's lead times with hardware, there's lead times with configuration, networking, loading software, etc. And with the HANA Enterprise Cloud, we're able to eliminate a lot of that risk associated with on-premise because we've built the standards and an architecture in place that's scalable and secure, so you can have that predictable phased delivery approach. The biggest differentiator is SAP's HANA Enterprise Cloud is setting the standard for deploying HANA in the industry, and we'll talk through this in a little bit more detail. On top of our application availability SLAs, there are a number of key benefits that customers will see from deploying SAP in the HANA Enterprise Cloud. We try to unlock the value of HANA, giving you access to all named and proactive resources, both within the cloud group, software development, and the innovation side. So if you think about how we operate today, the folks that run our cloud environments are also sitting next to the folks that develop the software and work with customer service. So you have unparalleled access to HANA and SAP expertise by leveraging this model. We've built a reference architecture that has been, as is referenced in the previous slide, set the standard for high availability, disaster recovery, and performance in the market today. That reference architecture is our intellectual capital, and it's blessed by the developers of SAP applications and HANA. We're with that reference architecture and a roadmap to deploy SAP applications and patching and revisions, you get the advantage of understanding when and where critical updates and upgrades are needed, or when simple operational service packs and enhancements are needed because of the integration with SAP customer service and SAP software development. We have the ability to manage industry-specific solutions and requirements for be it regulations or direct industry-related solutions within the HANA Enterprise Cloud. A good example of this is just GXP regulations when it comes to FDA compliance. We offer integration with all of our SAP native cloud solutions. So if you think about how to manage a general ledger or finance application connected to HR in the cloud or expense management in the cloud, leveraging HEC, we can provide that simple integration. And we offer a number of modular and rapid deployment solutions to get systems and a managed service up quickly and easily so that you can focus more on innovation. And lastly, I want to talk about our application level SLA. There's no equal in the market to an uptime SLA for an entire application stack. And that's the premise of how we built our reference architecture, is to ensure that users can access the systems running in the cloud with no interruption. We're able to fulfill a lot of business and technical requirements in this model because we can tune and scale solutions and services to match the needs of the customer. We understand when we built the offer that not every customer is unique, that every customer is unique and not every customer has the same requirements. Therefore, every hammer isn't there for the nail. Because we can do private, dedicated, virtual, and physical devices on infrastructure, we can change that at the customer's request, be it scale it up, scale it down. We can also include additional services to provide more basis level support or less basis level support, depending on the skill set that the customer has. And we're also able to offer full functional and full managed solutions in a quasi-SaaS model for customers today. So regardless of how you want to approach your SAP deployment and your development on HANA, we can give you a number of different tunable areas to ensure the business needs are met. This will allow you to unlock the full value of HANA in the cloud. It'll allow your resources to stay focused on business value. It'll eliminate a lot of complexity because SAP is managing that complexity and risk. And it helps in the day-to-day operations because now you have a team behind your existing SAP owners to help manage the operations. When we talk about the success that we've had in the cloud space, SAP's HANA Enterprise Cloud is our fastest growing cloud business unit globally. And you can see here we have over 720 customers. We manage more than 4x the number of HANA databases of our closest competitor. And our customer retention and our customer increasing their footprint is unparalleled. Because once customers start to see the value of offloading and the ability to focus on innovation versus operation, they continue to add workloads into the cloud. I'm happy to speak directly with anyone after this call, or you can reach me on email to talk through some of the examples that we have in the market and what customers have done to focus on a cloud deployment of SAP. So how do we get started? It's a relatively simple process, and we understand there's a number of technical detail we have to get to. But ultimately, a cloud architect will engage with you to start an assessment. And that assessment will look at your current landscapes, future landscapes, business needs, and timelines. And then we'll help build a roadmap. Once we have a high-level idea of the solutions you want to deploy and your roadmap, we'll work on budgetary pricing. We can then talk through contracting, and ultimately, we want to align with the deployment timeline and the model that which makes the most sense for your business so that you can start innovating. I'm going to close with one last slide. There are two ways to consume the cloud today. And in most of the customers you saw on that slide before, we start with a very low-risk cloud start agreement that allows you to consume non-production environments to start your Activate or your blueprinting phase within SAP. It gives you a very simple and easy termination right so you can deploy systems quickly to understand how you want to move forward long-term with SAP. And then you can transition that low-risk weekly run rate cloud agreement into a longer-term production agreement with the HANA Enterprise Cloud. With that, Ted, I'm going to turn it to you. I appreciate everyone's time.
Excellent, Seth. Thanks so much. So, guys, just to wrap up and really, bring this full circle. Takeaways and conclusions from this. To summarize what Alan and Kelsey from TBR said, as well as from Seth from the HANA Enterprise Cloud team. Hosted private cloud options are viable alternatives, especially as they fall within that middle of that delivery spectrum. But also keep in mind that private means a lot more than just security. Performance, reliability, and service options tend to be, those key driving, triggers for customers. Managed services are an excellent complement to any hosted private options. And as Seth mentioned, we have a number of very unique and application functional level managed services as part of HEC. As you all know, SAP Innovation delivers alignment, not just to the business, but also we deliver on that through simple operations. SAP HEC really is the private cloud industry standard, which enables end-to-end managed services across your current and your future SAP landscape. And then, as Seth mentioned, HEC's Cloud Start program is a great way for you to get a quick glimpse into that, HANA environment that you want to test or sample, in the cloud. And just before we shift into Q&A, we have a number of customer testimonials and other resources that we will be providing to you. Some of you will be receiving an email with links to these on-demand recordings. We also have a very unique focused customer webcast coming up on July 22nd, focused on one of our more recent customers, Yeti Coolers, and how they enabled a brand new, net new S4 HANA deployment into their environment. We've got some other resources available to you, an IDC white paper, obviously where you can find more information about HEC on sap.com, as well as access to the Digitalist magazine. But again, we'll be pushing all of this stuff out to you via an email with the links to all of this. And with that, we would like to shift it over to Q&A. And we did notice there were some questions coming in through the chat box. So I will pull that stuff up, and we can use the remaining 10 minutes to address some of those questions. So Alan and Kelsey, if you want to address any questions that came to you specifically, feel free to go ahead and speak to those now.
Sure. So one that came through was, are there examples of the unexpected savings that private cloud can provide? So I think what we were getting at there is that when evaluating private cloud, it's difficult, I think, to foresee all of the areas that a customer will be able to save money. So for many customers, you look at the initial price tag of private cloud, compare that and maybe the services price tag as well to what you're paying for your on-premise license and maintenance and the cost of maintaining the infrastructure associated with that. But I think going beyond that, there's efficiencies that are created through private cloud and especially through the managed services portion. So things like simplifying the management of multi-vendor support with on-premise applications. There can be unplanned downtime that's not necessarily accounted for, and it's costly to pay the people to within your organization to bring that system back up. And that's difficult to quantify in the beginning when making that evaluation, but all things that get offloaded from the customer point of view onto that managed service provider.
Excellent. Thanks, Kelsey. There was another question that just came in from CTS. What infrastructure platform do we use in the back end to migrate over to HEC? Seth, do you want to take that one?
I think I need to requalify the question. Are they asking about hardware that we deploy in our cloud model, or is there the migration from on-premise to the cloud is used with usually a physical disk? So if you're talking about moving data from a current system into the cloud, we usually don't do that over the wire just for latency purposes. We usually do it in a physical migration. I'm not sure that answers the question, but I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah, I'll let the gentleman from CTS expand on that, or maybe ask another question a different way. Were there any other questions? I don't know if I'm seeing them all come up on my side that I'm missing.
I don't see any others, Ted.
Okay. I thought I saw a couple more come up, and then I think they dropped. Okay, we'll give it another minute or two for the gentleman from CTS if you want to restate or expand on your question around the infrastructure platform, so we can make sure that we answer that completely. Okay, it looks like he got the answer. All right, folks, unless there's any other questions, we will go ahead and end this webcast. And as we mentioned before, we will be pushing out an email with links to the on-demand customer testimonials, resources we have available, as well as the link to the next customer session that we're doing with Yeti Coolers on July 22nd. I hope you guys can all make it. I have spent some time with the CIO from Yeti Coolers personally, and I can tell you he's a very, very animated gentleman, and it's a very, very interesting story about how they migrated straight to an S4 HANA environment on HEC and how it impacted their business. It's a really great story, and I think you guys will all appreciate Yeti's specific journey. So with that, we will close this out, and we will give you all roughly 7 or 8 minutes back in your day. Enjoy.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ted.
And thanks to Alan and Kelsey from TBR. Thanks, Seth.
Yep. Our pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.